En el marco de las celebraciones por el 50 aniversario del Instituto Mexicano del Petróleo, la Dirección de Desarrollo de Talento, en conjunto con el Fondo de Sustentabilidad Energética, FSE, y la Universidad Corporativa de Pemex, les dan la más cordial bienvenida a la conferencia Nuevos retos y nuevas oportunidades en petróleo y gas, una perspectiva y lecciones desde Europa. La conferencia será impartida por el profesor Paul Leeuw, director del Instituto de Petróleo y Gas de la Universidad Robert Gordon de Reino Unido. Vamos a solicitar al maestro Rafael López Tinajero, director de Desarrollo de Talento, nos dé un mensaje y presente a nuestro expositor.
Buenas tardes, compañeros y compañeras. Es para mí un honor darles la bienvenida al Instituto Mexicano del Petróleo en el marco del ciclo de conferencias El Futuro de la Energía en México, que realiza la Secretaría de Energía con el apoyo del Fondo de Sustentabilidad Energética y con motivo de la celebración del cincuentenario de los servicios ininterrumpidos que tiene el IMP. En esta ocasión, la Dirección de Desarrollo de Talento tiene el agrado de presentar la conferencia titulada Nuevos retos y nuevas oportunidades en petróleo y gas, una perspectiva y lecciones desde Europa. En esta conferencia contamos con la participación del profesor Paul Leeuw, quien es director del Instituto de Petróleo y Gas de la Universidad Robert Gordon en Aberdeen, Reino Unido. Es presidente del Centro de Innovación de Petróleo y Gas, presidente de Plan C, gobernador y vicepresidente del Colegio Robert Gordon, miembro de la Junta Aberdeen City and Shire Economic Future y del Scottish Government Industry Leadership Group for Oil and Gas. El profesor Paul Leeuw ha trabajado en la industria de petróleo y gas por más de 27 años para una serie de empresas, entre ellas Shell, Marathon Oil, Amoco, BP, Venture Production y Centrica Energy. Sus antecedentes profesionales incluyen puestos de alto rango en áreas de estrategia, comercialización, desarrollo de negocios, planeación y cadena de suministros. Posee el título de maestro en Ingeniería Mecánica por la Universidad de Twente, en Países Bajos, y una maestría en Administración de Negocios de la Cass Business School en el Reino Unido. Recibamos con un aplauso al profesor Paul Leeuw.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Let me start with a quick thank you to Maestro Rafael Lopez for hosting us here today. Very much appreciated. And also to the Energy Sustainability Fund of SENER, the Ministry of Energy, for sponsoring the conference itself. And of course, for everybody here from IMP for being here and for making us so welcome and for hosting the conference. My name is Paul Leeuw. I work for Robert Gordon's University. I'm here with my colleague Donella Beaton, who's in the front row, who you hopefully you can meet as well a little bit later on. And I think we're meeting at a very interesting time in our industry. For those who have memories, they can think back about when the energy forums were announced here in Mexico in December 2013. The oil price was just under $100, and of course, when I looked at it this morning, the price was just under $45. So very interesting and challenging times here, which require some very different way of thinking and a very different response. Now, I've been in the industry a very long time, and I've seen a number of these downturns in the past. They're never easy, they're always kind of challenging, but the industry tends to kind of come out in a leaner and fitter way. And so, I'm here on the invite of the government here in Mexico. I want to do really three things. One is a little bit of a perspective of what Robert Gordon University is all about. Then I want to give you my insight on the industry and the industry context. And then I want to spend the vast majority of time on maybe some lessons learned from the North Sea, which may be very applicable here in Mexico as you look at the next phase of opening up the market. I'll speak for about 45, 50 minutes, and then I open it up for questions. And since my very short time here in Mexico, I realized you are not shy, so I look forward to some really, really good questions later on. So you've got about 40 minutes or 45 minutes to think about them. So a little bit around Robert Gordon's University. Now, I realize that many of you might not have heard of the university, and it is no surprise. We are well over 9,000 kilometers or 6,000 miles away, based in Scotland, the United Kingdom. And there are a lot of universities in the UK, well over 140 universities, but there are very few which are specialized in oil and gas. And Robert Gordon's University is one of these universities who's actually predominantly focused on the oil and gas. Well over 16,000 students from over 120 countries around the world. So a huge amount of coverage from the people we have on the university. And we have an absolutely world-class reputation. A lot of people working in industry have actually worked with Robert Gordon's University or studied at the university. And we have a fantastic campus as well, as you can see some pictures of here on the slide. And the one thing we pride ourselves on is a very close working relationship with the industry. We have people from industry teaching at university, providing guest lectures, doing case studies, and actually the relationship is actually very deep with the industry itself. And before I came to the industry, I spent 27 years working in the industry. And before I came to university, I was actually a visiting professor before actually joining the university formally last year. We operate in a large number of countries providing specific degree programs, but also a large number of short courses. And they are very well received. We are in the UK the top university for graduate employment after 6 months, which is a fantastic outcome to be. And going to our university is almost as good a guarantee of getting a job anywhere else. And our record is actually better than most of the famous universities in the UK, and something, again, we are very, very, very proud of. So from a university perspective, other than from a personal perspective, we really look working with people here in Mexico, be it Pemex, be it IMP, and be it other organizations. We think there's a fantastic opportunity for more collaboration and cooperation, and we're very much looking forward to do so. Now, the good news is a lot of things happened over the last year. And actually, on the back of some agreements signed this year, the two countries now recognized each other's qualifications. So a Mexican qualification is recognized in the UK and the other way around, which is a huge step forward of actually increasing the collaboration between our two nations. We are very pleased that we are going to sign a formal memorandum of understanding with Centro tomorrow, and actually that will form the basis of a far deeper cooperation between what we're doing at the university and the fantastic opportunity set here available in Mexico. And we're very much looking forward to working with a wide range of organizations to actually set this memorandum of understanding up for success over many, many years to come. So, a little bit more background from a university perspective, and hopefully you can see it. 2015 has been a hugely important year for the Mexico-UK relationships. It was a year where we promote growth between the two countries in the area of business, science and culture. It was also the year of the formal state visit of your president to the United Kingdom. And again, we only get 2 state visits a year to the UK, so it was a really quite of an important event. During that 4-day state visit earlier in March, the President and his delegation spent 3 days on formal business in the London area. And the last day, they spent a day in Aberdeen to really get to know the oil and gas industry in Aberdeen, which is really the oil and gas capital of Europe. Robert Gordon's University was absolutely delighted to host a visit of the President and the delegation to our university, and I had personally the opportunity to meet the President and quite a lot of the members of the team with him at the day. And you can see some photos of the event here on the screen, where you probably can recognize quite a lot of people, including Senator Luis Miguel Barbosa Huerta, the President of the Directive Board of the Mexican Senate. And you can also see a picture of one of our Mexican students, Mario Ivan Marquez, who is a visiting research student doing a degree sponsored by the Mexican Academy of Science. So fantastic visit, and we had an opportunity to showcase some of the great things we do at the university. And one thing we're particularly proud of, and you can see a picture in here, is we have a state-of-the-art drilling simulator. And you can see both the president and Centro sitting in the seats there of a drilling simulator, where we can actually drill the wells before they get drilled in practice. It is the equivalent of a flight simulator where you can fly a plane before you actually fly it. We can do that, and we have a state-of-the-art facility, and we are currently the only university who have this kind of facility, certainly in our part of the world. And the good news is, I think on the back of the state visit, I understand that you're looking at building similar facilities here in Mexico, and we would be absolutely delighted to share our experience and know-how. Now, I'm conscious that a lot of people might not know what Aberdeen is, so I want to give you a little bit of background before I'll talk a little bit more about the opportunities I see in front of us. So Aberdeen has an absolute track record as one of the world's leading energy hubs, together with Houston, Calgary, and potentially Perth, Australia. Over the last so many years, we have developed a huge amount of skills and capabilities to support the most complex oil and gas challenges, be it new platforms, be it new designs, be it extraction from existing fields. You mentioned it, it's been done from the North Sea. And we also established a world-class supply chain. So not only do we look at the operator community, the companies we all know well, like BP and Shell, but there's also a huge capability being built up in the supply chain. And people might not realize it, but roughly over 50% of all the subsea activity in the world is either engineered or supported out of Aberdeen. And the UK is supporting these skills all across the world. So it is very likely you'll hear a British, Scottish or English accent anywhere in the oil patch around the world. So I also think that the universities in the UK are very well positioned to actually work with the supply chain and the operators to support any other worldwide opportunities, and also support the kind of very ambitious agenda your government has set out here for this country here. So if you look at the UK oil industry started over 50 years ago and have now recovered over 43 billion barrels oil equivalent. There's still a very substantial price out there, well over 20 billion barrels to be extracted. And we expect this industry to be there for many, many decades to come. The industry is a very, very large and important industry for the UK, supporting well over 375,000 jobs, and is one of the largest industrial sectors in the UK, attracting thousands and thousands of graduates each year. And we're very fortunate to have a really diverse range of operators and service companies in the North Sea. So it's a very different world, and probably a world you will see in the next so many years developing, where we have the very large operators, but also the very smaller independent companies and very innovative operators who only have maybe one or two assets. And this unique blend of companies and capabilities ensures that we're truly getting the best out of the worldwide capabilities. We really see practices coming in from anywhere around the world, coming into Aberdeen and the other way around. So really good practices get shared very quickly across the basin. So we have now world-leading capabilities across the full exploration and production spectrum, especially around geoscience, subsea engineering, and managing the mature offshore asset base. And the other thing, what is probably a big lesson as I travel the world, there are some quite interesting lessons can be learned from the North Sea. We are very, very good at managing older and declining assets, a challenge every basin will get sometime in their life. But we're also very good at managing the challenging and often smaller fields, applying new, very innovative technology, and also making sure that the cooperation between operators and suppliers really, really works. And of course, that needs to be done in a safely and environmentally sensitive way. So ladies and gentlemen, a little bit of context around the university and around Aberdeen. I want now to go into the main part of the presentation, which is really around what's the situation here in Mexico, which you probably all know quite a lot about, but also then what are some of the learnings from the North Sea. So I'm sure you're familiar with your industry here and the contribution it makes to the economy. But probably it might be worse to put it in a slightly wider context. So there is no doubt in my mind that Mexico is already in the Premier League of top producers. It's a top 10 player producing just over 3.3% of the world's oil production. And based on projections from the US Energy Information Administration in their 2014 outlook, the production is expected to increase to well over 3.5 million barrels by 2035, making this country a firm member of a very select group of countries producing more than 3 million barrels a day. From where I sit in the UK, I look at your opportunity set with envy. I would love to have the opportunity set in front of me where we can actually make a real difference. But it is worth noting that Mexico will be competing with other countries for investments, and it will compete with other hydrocarbon basins. At the moment, your immediate peer group is looking to attract new investors from all over the world and will offer very competitive terms to do so. And I'll pick a few examples, and I hope you can read it from the slide behind me. Iraq, for those who know, has been, of course, in a very difficult situation with coming out of post-war, but they're very, very keen to develop the oil and gas industry and actually really working very hard to get international companies coming in. Iran, another big producer, after hopefully the sanctions get lifted in the very near future, they will be seeking to develop the industry very, very rapidly and seeking a lot of investment from new countries coming in. Again, they'll be competing for capital in years to come. Just last month I was in Nigeria, and there's a big focus of moving from onshore to offshore. And Nigeria is working very hard to attract, again, that kind of capital to make it work. And of course, closer to home, Brazil is looking at a huge amount of investment, either to mitigate the risk and to share some of the cost. So if you're sitting in a corporate boardroom, which I previously was, and you look at the current environment and the forward market, it certainly focuses the mind of the individuals where to invest. You all know hard decisions already have been made, and no doubt with the current price environment, further hard decisions will be made to allocate the scarce kind of capital which is available. So not only need new opportunities to compete on a worldwide portfolio basis, they also need to be robust in the current price environment and really need to reflect the kind of risk-reward balance what companies are looking for. So maybe a slightly complicated slide, but I just want to make sure I show this. So I have to say, from my perspective, I've been absolutely truly impressed by the determination and drive to implement the market reforms here in Mexico, but fully recognize that more work is to be done in months and years to come. So Mexico has a long-term standing and track record in other international market sectors, and particularly the automotive industry and the consumer product industry. But I think we all agree that it's a relative newcomer to the international oil investor market. Now, given the capital intensity of this industry, investors tend to look at a basket of risk factors before considering investment decisions. And again, from personal experience, when I was in my previous role and we had to look at where we would invest, you would typically look at a basket you see here, particularly around what's the market transparency, particularly around corruption, what is the ease of doing business, so can you get in the country, is it easy to set it up, but also is the country ready to business, is the infrastructure there. So I think from a personal basis, the market reforms are going a long way to address the risk factors companies look at, but it is worth considering the typical exploration and production cycle companies consider. So from obtaining acreage and drilling an exploration well, appraising any successful discoveries, to developing and commencing production, can typically take up to 6 years or more for shallow water and well up to 10 years or more for deep water. In this period, if you think about it, Mexico will have 2 more presidential elections, 2 more elections for the Senate, and 3 more elections for the Chamber of Deputies. So a lot can happen over this period, and of course investors will take this into account as they think about the investment cycle. So it is absolutely key that investors have the confidence not only in the stability of the system, but also that the reforms position Mexico to be the leading country in terms of international benchmarking around the market transparency, the ease of doing business, and of course the readiness to do business as well. But I have to say the early action this country has taken is really promising. I've absolutely been impressed by the transparency of the process and particularly what has been done on the licensing rounds. And I'm also very impressed with the speed which the government here is adapting to change to make sure that the next phase of licensing rounds are as attractive as possible for companies seeking to invest here in Mexico. And I'm really looking forward to see the outcome, what is going to happen in the next so many weeks. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a picture you probably recognize quite well, and I think Mexico has an absolutely long and distinguished track record in producing oil and gas. I don't need to remind anybody in the room here that commercial production started well over 115 years ago in 1901, and in 1921 at its peak, Mexico actually accounted almost for a quarter of the world's oil production, being the second largest producer in the world after the US. At that time, there were about 450 companies active in the oil and gas industry. And I know history is not always the best guide to the future, but I'm sure in this case lessons can be learned. And of course, oil is hugely important for the economy here in the country. Sales contribute around up to 40% of the federal budget, domestic consumption 2 million barrels, and of course it underpins domestic growth. And which is hugely important. As I understand, over the last 15 years, the population here increased by 21 million people. And of course, for those who travel around Mexico City, the number of cars and vans on the road has doubled to around 33 million cars and vans. So you can see huge dynamics playing out. And if I look around this room and look around town, and I've only been here for a very short period of time, I recognize that 30% of Mexico's population is still under the age of 15. So we can only see substantial growth in years to come. But actually, if you look from an oil and gas perspective, the decline in some of the fields are probably a key reminder of the challenge ahead. And particularly, I think the energy reforms should provide the catalyst for the next chapter in the history of this great industry. So at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, I maybe kind of switch a little bit more to the UK and do the third part of my story, because this kind of reduction in production is something we recognize very well in the United Kingdom. Similar to Mexico, the early phase of the North Sea was characterized by around 20 major fields or field clusters, which produced the vast majority of oil and gas in the UK. When the production of these fields declined in the mid-1990s, the UK was faced with a real challenge, a challenge not dissimilar to what you're going through at the moment. And the UK government and industry worked closely together to turn this challenge into a real opportunity. And the result you can see in the chart behind me. So production peaked 15 years ago around 4.5 million barrels a day, and since then we have successfully managed a steadily declining basin. Now it is worth noting that the basin used to be dominated by a number of very large fields. Completely switched over time. We now have over 400 individually producing fields in the North Sea operated by a wide different groups of operators. And I think the reforms being introduced here in Mexico provide the same framework for a similar transition you can expect over the next so many years. So let me characterize a little bit more in detail what actually happened. So as the basin matured, the industry evolved and adapted to a very, very new environment. But it probably can be characterized in kind of 4 big areas you can see on the slide here. And the first big shift is a shift from international oil companies coming in to a far more diverse group of operators. And the equivalent I think I see here in Mexico is moving from a single operator to the more diverse operator group. As I've seen across the world, and I work for some of these international oil companies, they bring fantastic know-how, they bring a huge amount of risk capital, they have strong balance sheets, and they are really good at doing the mega projects. They establish the infrastructure and they can open many new fields. On the back of that, we have seen a many variety of companies coming in, often having a very different materiality threshold or a different risk profile or different investment metrics. Companies who prepare to take more risk and maybe get a higher reward for that, but also pick the smaller developments. So now we have well over 60 different operators in the North Sea. We have the big names, the BPs and the Shells of this world, but we also have a lot of very small companies which you probably have never heard of. We also have over 100 large service companies, the likes of the Schlumberger and the Technips, which are worldwide companies in the country, and well over 2,200 small and medium-sized contractors. Now, although a large part of the work done in the North Sea is supporting North Sea activities, the supply chain is focusing around 50% of our efforts in overseas opportunities now. And that is actually providing a huge learning to take some of the North Sea knowledge base to other overseas locations. Another big shift has been around the regulatory regime. Initially, we had a very prescriptive regime. Everything and every expectation was written down, and it was expected that companies would follow this. Over time and building on the learnings of the Piper Alpha disaster, a disaster where an oil platform in the North Sea exploded with loss of 167 lives. The regime changed quite dramatically to a far more goal-setting approach, where companies have to demonstrate what they're trying to do to achieve the goal. So rather than saying they'll follow these rules, they're saying this is the goal and what are you going to do about getting there. I'll show you an example in a minute. And this changed the culture quite dramatically. So the culture changed towards a culture of benchmarking, transparency and league tables. So companies could see where they are, how they rank to the peer group and what they can do to improve. And that's greatly benefited the industry and created the more cooperative environment we're now currently seeing. The other big change was around the fiscal regime. As the UK faced increasing competition from other basins and the North Sea declined over time, the government introduced a very progressive regime to lower the fiscal burden and introduce a number of specific allowances aimed at stimulating activity. Now, I don't want to say that the UK is a perfect example, but what I think it has been very good at is adapting to change. And I think that adapting to change is something which I think might be very valuable for other basins and hopefully including here what's playing out in Mexico. So these changes were made for a reason, and that's what's on the slide behind here. And what we looked at in the UK is what is the real characteristic of a really efficient market. An efficient market means everything is run to the best possible ability. And some of the things I want to talk about today is an efficient market is highly transparent. So you know what good looks like, you know what companies operate in, you know what the performance of these companies is compared to each other. The second thing I want to look at is continuous improvement. An efficient market will continuously improve and focus where companies go, and you can see the culture of continuous improvement to happen. Clear government and industry cooperation is another key characteristic. It is great that the government sets the policy and the regulations and for companies to follow it. But actually that combination of what's the right policy, what's the right way of following it is going to be hugely important to do. And the last one is around application on technology and innovation. And again, really kind of effective markets and are really good at putting new technology and innovation in. Now, the UK has been really quite successful at this. The UK is doing around 1% of the world's production, has about 0.5% of the world's reserves. But we have been able to attract a disproportionate amount of capital to come to the UK. So obviously we have followed these rules quite well. And actually, despite the cost challenge, despite the price issues with the oil and gas price, we are still seeing that the UK is an effective and an attractive place for companies to invest. And I think that's a kind of real good message, is how do we drive that efficiency in other markets. So let me talk a little bit about market transparency and give you some examples, because I think there are some real examples where I think the UK is a world leader, and particularly when it comes to health, safety and environment regulations and applications. So the industry has been working for years very closely with government and trade unions to make the UK the safest oil province in the world to work in. I don't know how many people in the room have visited the UK or have worked in the UK, but when you go there, you'll notice a real safety culture. HSE is, of course, a critical importance, and what we have said is that anybody can stop a job if they believe it's not safe. Doesn't matter if you're the managing director or you're a technician offshore, anybody can stop a job. If we can't do it safely, we don't simply do it at all. And this safety culture had far deeper implications, had helped to empower the employees to take real ownership of what they're doing. And HSE and safety culture is now a fundamental part of the DNA of how we do business in the United Kingdom. And what we found is that a good safety culture is actually very closely correlated to good business. As assets are better maintained, jobs are planned better and are done more safely. And learning from the safety culture, we now see the same approach and transparency in other areas as well. So it's cost benchmarking, operating efficiency, just to name a few. And we will certainly be talking later on this week to ASEA to actually maybe share some of these great practices and experiences. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you an example, and I don't know how many health, safety, and environment experts are in the room here, but this is a picture which is well used within that community. But for me, it really typifies where the focus needs to be. And this is very much a kind of a ladder as you go up it. And depends where you are, or which company you are, is where you sit. So anywhere if you go from left to the top right is where the whole culture and understanding of safety is significantly improving. And really, it is around the mindset that companies go through it. Anywhere from where people are pathological, so basically, who cares when an incident happens, you know, things go wrong, to where over time people saying is, we don't want to do that, we're reacting to an incident and we'll make sure it never happens again, to where it becomes very calculative, where people saying is, actually we have the system and processes in place to manage this. In the UK, it's still developing. So the UK is probably somewhere around the calculative and proactive period, but it is quite interesting. You don't move from one to the other. And I think this whole experience, how this has been managed, has been hugely helpful for the organizations to do so. Now, to make this happen, the UK set up an organization called Step Change in Safety. And Step Change in Safety was really set up by the industry and is actually a membership organization. It was set up in 1997 and it is run by the operators and the big service companies to drive safety and safety performance up. And it's a great example where things can make a very material difference. I realize this slide is hard to read, but this is the injury rate per 100,000 workers for each year. And the good news is, on the back of a number of very good industry-agreed initiatives, over a very limited period of time, in this case just under kind of 15 or 16 years, we managed to reduce the incidents by 80%, 80%, which is absolutely incredible and makes it actually one of the more safer industries in the UK. It only worked because of close collaboration between industry, the authorities, the trade unions, to actually make that real difference. And one thing we don't do in the North Sea, we do not compete on safety performance. Any lessons learned get learned by everybody in a very coherent and constructive way. The second one I want to share with you is around the environmental impact. And this is the number of hydrocarbon releases over time. Again, a number of different colors on here, between minor releases, significant releases, and major releases, and the total releases. And again, some great example by actually not competing, but learning from every operator, big, small, what the best practices are. We managed to reduce hydrocarbon releases by over 50% over the last couple of years. So real change is being made by a very different culture of continuous improvement, real transparency, and a very different way of thinking about how our industry works and how we can drive performance in a different way. So the second area I want to focus in is how do you maximize economic recovery? There's a huge reserve base here in Mexico, be it onshore or be it offshore. And again, it will be in the interest of everybody, be it the government, be it the industry, the supply chain, or all support industries, that actually the last drop of oil and the last molecule of gas is recovered in an economic and valuable way. So huge experience, I think, from the North Sea perspective as well. So the North Sea established a new oil and gas authority. Bear with me 2 seconds. Sorry. Sorry about that. So the North Sea established a new oil and gas authority as the new regulator in 2014. And the new regulator is very similar to what you have here in the National Hydrocarbon Commission in Mexico. So the industry was originally regulated by the Department of Energy and Climate Change, not dissimilar to SENA. But over time, it was recognized as a new structure was required to ensure the best possible delivery from the North Sea. So the Oil and Gas Authority is a very separate government agency that is led by senior leaders from both industry and government. So industry people have gone into the agency to provide the regulation for the industry. And the authority is really focused on 3 areas. One is what it says, what it should be doing is regulation, really focusing around licensing and policy development. The second one is around influencing, particularly to get the culture right, to get the behaviors right, and get the collaboration right. And the third area is around promoting the industry, getting more investment in the UK, value creation and industry development, and is really a very active body to do so. So the new authority brings up together all the various government departments other than Treasury and brings it all together and acts as a single regulator for the industry, so one focal point. Now, early days yet, but the indications are that there's a very positive change for both government and industry alike. And I know, having spoken to members of the Oil and Gas Authority, that there's a lot of interest from other countries how this works. And again, no doubt it might be relevant for Mexico in years to come as well. So another couple of examples I wanted to talk about is more around how do you get more standardization coming through, and how actually, when different companies coming in, always different standards, different ways of working practices, actually there's maybe some degree of standardization and approach can be made. And I'm going to talk about two examples here. One is around how do we set standards for training and actually having an industry standard for consistency of how to do that one. And the other one is for the supply chain of how companies pre-qualify. They both have been quite fundamental in setting it up. So the first thing I want to talk about is an organization called Opito. Opito was established in 1997 as the Petroleum Industry Training Board, and since then evolved to a global organization. And you can see what they cover here on the slide behind me. So they train to common standards well over 350,000 people per year to in-country delivery. And this is predominantly vocational training. So it might be technicians or operators, or it might be to do with emergency response training. But basically what we have seen happening is you want to actually make sure that people are trained to the common standards. So when they move between companies, you don't have to retrain them. They move between countries, you don't want to retrain them. And you want to make sure that the standard to be trained for, they have a certificate they can see and saying is, I am trained to this particular approach. It's been hugely successful, currently operating in 45 countries and serving well over 80% of the leading operators in the world. So a fantastic example where with a bit of positive thinking, a bit of good cooperation and some of the standards, you can actually bring something together very, very quickly. There's already an Opito approved training center here in Mexico, operated by a company called Valk, and is really focused on emergency training for offshore installation managers and for others, and hopefully more to come. So a really kind of interesting example, because I know from my conversations with Senna here that well over 135,000 people need to be trained here in Mexico over the next so many years. And with 100,000 people roughly to be in vocational type jobs. So it is going to be absolutely key to have a mechanism which we can learn from, which allows people to get that certificate and saying, yeah, I can work here or I can work somewhere else, which is internationally recognized. The second example I want to share today is around pre-qualification and compliance. Now, normally this is quite a tough subject to talk about, and I always risk losing the audience when I talk about compliance, but I think it's a hugely important issue. So as new companies come into Mexico over years to come, they all come with their different ways of working potentially, all have different standards, all have different expectations, and particularly on the supply chain. And you can imagine as a new supply chain develops for the new activity coming up, you want to make sure you have the most efficient mechanism that companies pre-qualify. So first of all, you need to find out who is actually our service providers in the sector. Are the service providers delivering the quality? Are they have the competency? And do they have the capability to do so? So there's a pre-qualification process where people saying is, yeah, I can deal with you and I would like to work with you. Now, traditionally, each company used to do their own checks and saying is, yeah, I can work with this company, do their own audits, check everything out. It's a hugely inefficient and expensive process. So an organization called First Point Assessment Limited was set up in the UK in 1997 and really focusing on to provide that pre-qualification service. So it is one database, one place for the operator, the community to go to figure out is which companies can I deal with, what are the competencies, the capabilities, and how do they work. So pretty well all the suppliers are registered with First Point Assessment at the moment in the UK, and is also the main place for buyers to access suppliers. Currently covers 8 countries, over 3,700 companies you can see in here, and 800 of these companies have verified audits in place. So it doesn't matter if you're a Shell, it doesn't matter if you're a BP or a Chevron, you will only do an audit once and you accept each other's audits. So it is actually quite an efficient process to do supplier pre-qualification. And it also allows, it is completely transparent. The system allows performance feedback, so you know you deal with a good organization and not dissimilar to TripAdvisor, which I think is really quite helpful. Now, I understand that Pemex is looking at the possibility of introducing a similar system here in Mexico, and I know initial conversations are already in action with the First Point Assessment on that one. So, ladies and gentlemen, shifting gear a little bit around government and industry collaboration. I know a number of members of government are in the room here, and it is one of the key strengths of the oil and gas industry has been the continued dialogue between the UK government and the oil and gas industry. Similar to Mexico, it is a hugely important industry in the UK. It's employing us. Roughly 1 out of 80 jobs in the UK are supporting the oil and gas industry. So it is absolutely in everybody's interest that government at the highest level meet with industry to understand what the issues and opportunities are. So to do so, a mechanism called Pilot was set up to make these discussions to happen. Very much focused on safety, production and technology. And Pilot meet 3 times a year and is attended by government ministers, industry and key stakeholders. And I have the very fortunate position to attend Pilot and represent all the universities in the UK on that forum. So I can see a Mexican equivalent of this, regular meetings between Center, National Carbon Commission, Treasury, industry leaders, a potential trade association, and other key stakeholders, including the unions. It is a hugely powerful body and it really has made a massive difference. In addition, the UK established a fiscal forum quite specifically to enable direct conversations between Treasury and the industry about the tax regime. It is really important that both parties know what the issues and challenges are and how to stimulate new activity. Now, it's not always been an easy conversation between government and industry, and I can guarantee you that. But overall, it's been actually a very constructive and very important part of the industry to make sure these conversations happen. And it has actually approved the whole regulatory and fiscal regime in the North Sea. Now, the other very important development is around the trade associations. And it might be a concept which is a bit different from what is playing out here in Mexico, because Pemex has always been the leading oil and gas company. But it is worth noting that as new companies coming in, it might be very beneficial to think about the concept of a trade association. The UK established Oil and Gas UK many years ago to represent the operator and supply chain community, not only with government, but represented full stop, could be in the media, could be somewhere else. And Oil and Gas UK enables companies to have common conversations and meet them in a kind of constructive manner. It also avoids that each company is lobbying government for a particular reason. Everything is going to be the single voice to Oil and Gas UK. And it also publishes information on a regular basis so that information is very transparent, open and available. It has been a very constructive model. It has been copied in the Netherlands, been copied to some extent in Norway, and I know that Oil and Gas UK has many other conversations with other countries to set it up as a mechanism to be far more efficient. So, ladies and gentlemen, the last big category I want to talk about is technology and innovation. And I know a lot of people in the room here are probably in that space. And it's, of course, a hugely important area for our industry and also, of course, for both Mexico and the North Sea. Now, I have no doubt we have a proven track record in Aberdeen in the whole area of technology and innovation, but there are far more opportunities to improve what we do and how it currently works. The oil and gas industry tend to be fairly conservative and risk averse in how they approach technology. And there's a real, what I call, race to be second. Nobody wants to be the first organization to apply technology. But I think there's, certainly in the UK, a drive to actually change that dynamic quite considerably. And I want to talk a little bit more around the creation of a technology board and the Oil and Gas Innovation Centre, which I have the privilege to sharing. It is also hugely important that the universities are connected to this, and particularly about on the research they can support to deliver new innovation to the marketplace. So let me talk a little bit more about how the UK has tackled this, and I apologize, the writing is rather small here. But the UK set up very recently a new technology leadership board representing both the industry and the government and the universities on it. And the Technology Leadership Board is really setting the demand agenda across the industry. So really, what are the big technology areas we should focus on to make the industry success in the future? It moves away from an individual company agenda. It says, I need this, I need that, and before you know it, nobody knows what actually needs to be done. So it is a common understanding across the basin what needs to be done. And the very clear agenda for the Technology Leadership Board in the UK, for example, is around new technology for small pool developments, getting small fields developed in an efficient and cost-efficient manner. The second one is simplify well construction. We have hundreds of different wells types, so how do we get to a far simpler well construction? And the last one is around asset management and do that far more efficient. That is supported by a number of organizations who do either joint industry projects or do contract research, and there's a lot of funding organizations behind. But the big change here is a common demand picture. What needs to be done so that people can focus their effort really well. Universities can link into it saying this is our applied research we need to do. Technology centers can focus on saying we support the industry, and this helps hugely to improve how we look at technology across the industry. And the picture really looks like this. So demand is being set by the Technology Leadership Board that allows the universities, the technology centers, and any other commercial organizations to focus their offer specifically, because they know that when they develop the product, there's going to be a real demand for it. It has significantly improved linkages between the universities and the industry. And from a Robert Gordon's University perspective, it's been really helpful to know what we need to focus our applied research on, and also need to focus what's important to the industry, so we can actually look at our agenda over the next 5 or 10 years and kind of tailor it accordingly. And the other thing what has created this very clear demand picture is a far better cooperation and collaboration between industry and the universities and the technology centers, because actually there's a far better alignment of what needs to be done. So it really leverage the capabilities what sits in the universities to be far more supportive. And these are the kind of 8 technology areas we're really focusing on. No surprise, I think you can see the whole exploration and production value chain here, but very much focused on subsea exploration, particularly focused on asset management given the maturity of the North Sea Basin, decommissioning, enhanced oil recovery, production optimization, well construction, and shale gas development. A lot of it which I think will be highly relevant for what is the next chapter here in Mexico as well. The other big development is something I had the privilege of setting up and now currently chair, which is around the Oil and Gas Innovation Center. And this is really focusing on a bit of the market segment which is not being served very well. And having traveled to various places around the world, I think this is not unique to the UK, it's been the same in other areas. So the very large companies, BPs and Shells of this world, they will do anything from basic research to implementation. They have big research labs and can do it very well. But as new companies coming in the basin here in Mexico, you will find that a lot of the independents do not have in-house research and development capability. They rely on the market to actually provide them with the research and development they're going to need. If you have utility companies coming in, they will even have less capability in-house as well. So then you're going to rely on the supply chain. Now, some of the very large supply chain companies will have in-house R&D capability. Those who work with Schlumberger or other organizations know they have a very large research center and a very successful research center. But the vast majority of supply chain companies do not have this capability. And that's why we set up the Oil and Gas Innovation Center, is actually to link the demand of the supply chain and allow universities to do contract research for the supply chain. So having a very clear demand agenda set by the new Technology Leadership Board, so we know what we need to do. Supply chain companies can then saying is, okay, I want to do a piece of work, but I might need some university research to help me on material selection, or need a new control system, or need to do some computational analysis on some of the stresses they face in their new tools. So that link is now being linked, and what we currently now linking is 2,300 supply chain companies with 12 universities and around 450 academic staff to help out. And it's been a real transformation in our industry, how we work that. And again, from our own university's perspective, we've been very active, both competing and delivering projects to help the supply chain on a contract research and development basis. Again, a very different approach for how to connect this huge capability that sits in our respective universities to help and assist the industry. So the project and the process has been very helpful depending on where you sit. From an innovator community, they really like the whole process of this because it gives them access to funding, access to know-how, and access to data. They know what the industry wants and how it's going to work. It allows them to rapidly grow their business because when they develop the new technology, there's a demand for, and it gives them a very standard approach. The operator community, again, the BPs and Shells of the world really quite like it because they set a demand agenda. It accelerates new technology, and it allows for contract R&D to be done on their behalf. And the universities really like it because it gives them access to new opportunities, better alignment with the industry, and of course it gives them funding and potentially spin-off benefits. And one of the companies, for example, I chair at the moment, is a spin-off which has some really interesting new technology which is going to benefit the industry greatly over time. So currently, since we started in 2014, we made a huge amount of progress. As you can see, we got quite a lot of funding in place, over 330 million pesos in terms of funding over the next 5 years. Team is up and running. The Innovation Center co-funds new research and development activity. Projects typically take 3 to 6 months to be executed at universities, and it really is around providing contract R&D by universities for the industry. Over the moment, we have working with 150 companies. That's in 1 year. And so by the time, hopefully, we'll speak to you in a few years' time, the number will be far larger. 50 projects currently in discussion, and numbers already being executed. So it's been quite a success story to actually transform the innovation and technology agenda in the North Sea. And gentlemen, I'm conscious I've been talking to you a very long time, and I want to make sure we have time for questions and answers, because I think it would be quite good to engage. So let me just wrap it up in my last slide before I say I open it for questions. So first thing, from a university perspective, a great privilege again to be here. We're very much looking forward to working with our colleagues here in Mexico. I think the memorandum of understanding we're going to sign tomorrow will form a fantastic basis to do so. And I think there's a lot about what can be learned and capabilities we maybe can share with our colleagues here. We've only been here for a very short period of time, but I mean, the enthusiasm and the openness has been truly remarkable, and I look forward to kind of again working with people here. I think the market reforms, what's playing out in Mexico, are, I think, very exciting. I know when time you go to transition, it doesn't feel like that, but I think what is currently playing out, it will set you up for a very exciting near future, and will create many new opportunities. I think the experience we have in the UK, where appropriate, can be very relevant to accelerate developments here. There are many good practices here in Mexico we absolutely can learn from ourselves, but again, the whole thing is having the dialogue to figure out what does good practice look like. And from a UK perspective, I think this has been a very important year. The state visit was a real catalyst in the conversations, and I think there's some fantastic partnerships we can have. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you. So if my microphone works, now the hard bit. I'm going to open it up for questions. We have some translation service as well. So Victor, if you want to do it in Spanish, please do so. My Spanish is not very good, so I won't probably understand it, but Victor can translate, so either in English or Spanish.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your interesting presentation. I am Jose Martinez. I could appreciate graphically the trend of injury versus time, where is shown the diminishing of injury as a function of a rising safety information in work. So I want to know where I can find more information about that interesting topic.
So great question. So the question around is what has played out over the safety story. The best place to go is the organization I refer to is Step Change in Safety. Step Change in Safety is very transparent. It is the oil and gas organization. It will publish where we are with safety. It said it is owned by the industry, run for the industry, and set up to share. So that's the place I need to go to. If you can't find it on your smartphone immediately, come and see me after the session, and I'll make sure I'll give you the website. Yeah? Okay, don't worry, but I'll make sure you'll find it, because it is a very good website and they have a lot of information. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for such an interesting talk. I could have been a little bit happier if you could let us know what are the benefits of all this scheme of working with industry, government, suppliers, if knowing the benefits for the end users, I mean the utility users, the petrol users, prices, what are the real benefits? Because this scheme looks quite nice, but until we know the real benefits to society, we will be convinced whether this scheme will work or not. I mean, you have projects, let me just say, point out that projects for 3 to 6 months, I mean, those are not research and development projects, not at all.
Okay, so let me try to make you happy, okay? So that's important. So 2 bits of happy. I want to talk about the research, but more importantly, why is this cooperation between government and industry helpful? One is, it actually makes the whole process far more efficient and far more transparent. What we have seen is that data is a lot more available, so I can see what other companies do, what other organizations do, and that actually that has driven a huge amount of efficiency. So things get done a lot quicker, people speak the same language about the same issues, and it's been hugely beneficial. So that's the first thing, what actually in North Sea has been happening. Not unique to the UK. If you go to across the water and you go to Norway, which is another major oil and gas province, equally successful. Where I'm originally from in the Netherlands, equally successful. So the processes have been proven to be quite helpful. Again, each country will have its own challenges, but it's certainly, from what I've seen around, traveled and lived in different countries around the world, has been quite helpful. On the research question, slightly different, and you're absolutely right that research projects could be anywhere from a couple of years. What I am talking about is breaking these things down in distinct phases. So there might be a phase 1 of research work, a phase 2 of research work, and then maybe a longer phase. So absolutely, some of the work can be done over a number of years. But when you break it down to its component parts, this is very much more focused on applied research than on fundamental research. So a number of these projects we have started have taken 6 months, others might potentially take a couple of years, and we're perfectly okay with that. What we don't want to do is do research if the industry does it because it's a demand-driven agenda. We don't want to spend 10 years doing it because the demand might be very different by the time we get there. So we have broken it down to smaller component parts to do so.
What about the benefits for the end users of all these products that the oil industry produces?
So
it would be very nice to see a price list or the development of prices once the UK enter into the oil boom. I mean, otherwise, it sounds very good, but if the benefits are for a few, the large companies, the international companies, what's the point?
So I don't have a price list, I can't show you that bit, but what I can tell you is that the UK has been hugely successful in attracting capital to come to the country. Now, in itself, that's an indication that people want to invest there. Now, will it happen in the future? Who knows? But it has certainly been a very attractive place to invest for all the benefits as I shared. Now, which is a great outcome because, again, for the reserves and the production we have attracted a disproportionate amount of capital. And I think that has been a very helpful price for jobs, for taxes being created, for production being created, and actually has benefited the country quite substantially. But there are other prizes as well. And again, each country will benefit in a different way, and I think your challenge is absolutely fair. Okay. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes.
There's a microphone coming, I think, or is it?
Make my question.
Come back to that. Spend, yeah.
Not lose the track. Usted presentó dos temas muy interesantes, el mejoramiento de la seguridad y la certificación del personal que trabaja en plataformas. En los dos casos, creo que tenemos caso en México. Apenas la semana pasada se nos murió otra persona en Apcatún Alfa y eso no es permisible. Hemos perdido muchas oportunidades de producir más petróleo, más destilados, pero precisamente por el problema en esa plataforma no hemos podido hacerlo. Entonces se destraba una gran oportunidad en que su universidad, si es que se va a firmar este acuerdo que usted dice, ayude a la certificación del personal que trabaja en plataformas. Pero ahí viene la primera pregunta. ¿Robert Gordon es únicamente para lo que nosotros llamamos upstream o también para downstream? La certificación de personal, yo digo. Nosotros también tenemos la otra gran parte de Pemex es downstream, ¿verdad? Y el segundo renglón de prioridad que usted pone pues es la cuestión tecnológica. Entonces aquí igual, nosotros somos líderes mundiales en la producción de petróleo en aguas someras. Entonces yo quisiera saber si ustedes pudieran aportar algo a ese liderazgo que tiene México en aguas someras. Tal vez en aguas profundas pueda haber muchos renglones de oportunidad en tecnología, pero igual, esto, Robert Gordon, aparentemente es solamente para upstream y no para downstream. ¿Me podría aclarar esos puntos?
Okay. I hear a number of questions, but I rely on my colleague here.
It's a bit challenging to capture the two ideas. Basically, the questions are two. The first one is whether this memorandum that is going to be signed tomorrow will help the Robert Gordon University to improve safety in operations here in Mexico, but not only in upstream, but also in downstream. That's the first question. And well, in the second question is whether we in Mexico, as leaders in shallow waters production, can contribute to something to the North Sea in terms of our expertise.
So let me take the two questions, if that's all right. So the first thing, the memorandum of understanding we're going to sign is for collaboration and really making sure that some of the expertise we have developed at the university can be used for the benefit of potential students coming over to the UK, but also to provide potential training opportunities here in Mexico. So it's absolutely focused on helping and supporting the next phase of developments in the North Sea, including the safety element. There's a huge amount of work we do in the whole area around health, safety and environment and how to make sure we share what good practices look like. So yes, is the answer to that one. The second question, what can we learn from Mexico? You have an incredible industry. That's why I talked about going back well over 115 years. There's some incredible work practices developed here. And one thing I certainly want to make sure I take back from this trip and the conversations we're going to have later on is a kind of sharing of all these kind of best practices. But we need to have that conversation to start. And that's what part of this visit is about and my memorandum of understanding is about, is actually having that conversation with Pemex, with IMP, with other organizations so that we can actually have people to talk to each other who are actually knowledgeable about it. So we can learn from your, actually also your onshore experience, potentially what you're going to do in the whole shale developments in the future as well. So yes, it is a two-way process. And as I said, we have a huge amount to learn from the expertise here. There was a gentleman in the back, sorry, I want to make sure I get that.
Yes, one more question. Thanks for your talking. I see the numbers that you show in the graphs, but I'm wondering how can you see the universities in Mexico compared to the universities in the United Kingdom in these opportunities to make some research for particular demands of the industry, and if you have some experience with other countries that you have already worked, for example, in the Commonwealth, in other third world countries, compared to the universities in the first world in United Kingdom or others like in Norway? That's my question.
Yeah, no problem at all. So as a university, we have been working over the last couple of decades with quite a few different countries. So we have a 10-year relationship, for example, in Algeria. We're working very closely with the largest gas producer in Algeria, a state organization, to actually train and develop some of the people and provide the expertise to actually also develop their markets and opening it up. We're active in other countries. We've been in Singapore, we've been in Russia, we're doing quite a bit in Nigeria. So we're operating in quite a lot of the countries with kind of different challenges to bring both a combination of helping in-country support, but we also have quite a lot of scholarship people coming to the university who want to develop their own skills and take it back to become like almost like train-the-trainer type concept. So there's a huge experience sitting there. Now, why Robert Gordon's University? Yes, we are specialized in oil and gas. That's what we do. That's our main focus as an organization. And that's why I say it's so important we have the relationship here as well. So that's something we have been doing with industry for a very long time. The good news is we work with pretty well all the major operators, certainly the ones operate out of Europe and the US. So we know very much what the client base is needing. And actually we have provided support for them wherever they went around the world. We did a big program with Chevron in Houston, and we do a lot of other programs all around the world with different operators. So we have that expertise and experience to do so. And again, I think I can certainly see that other universities, including ourselves, can probably provide a similar kind of learning here in Mexico, where it is helpful again. And so we need to find the right connection with the universities here to make these exchange programs happen. So I can see people coming from Mexico to explain some of the technologies that are being applied here into the European market, as well as the other way around. So it is very much an exchange of ideas, an exchange program for the universities to do so. Thank you. Lady there. Yes, please.
You were talking about this oil and gas innovation center that has connected 2,300 operators and service companies, 12 universities, 450 academic staff. But also you mentioned the 3 to 6 months project duration. I'm wondering what type of project are those? Because here in the IMP, Mexican Petroleum Institute, we do research for the oil and gas industry, and these are projects, the duration from 2 years to maybe 5 years at the most. So I'm wondering, what you presented, I know you have been doing it for a while, several years, and it's working. But I wonder what type of projects are those of 3 to 6 months where all these community of the universities and centers are interacting?
So I'll give you a few examples. Some is on the confidentiality, please. So I'll just give you a very generic example. So one is particularly around mathematical calculations, how we can replace solid pipelines with flexible hoses. Yeah, so a very different way of looking at it. And there was a particular piece of mathematical calculation required. So the company couldn't do that in-house because it didn't have the capability. They need to get a university involved. The project needs to be done. It lasted about 3 or 4 months, and they're now doing phase 2, which is going to last another 6 months. So overall, probably be a year by the time we've finished. And then they will do the rest in-house again, and might have to come back for a third phase. The second example is where we actually using a complete new coating to avoid corrosion. And so a very different kind of particular type of technology where people saying is, okay, I need to do some material testing on the lab conditions for that work. So the company has developed it, but they need something done by specific machinery which is not available in their company, and they can't buy it for that particular task. So they're saying is, can we get a specific piece of applied work done to develop, test it, and then when we have done it, we'll maybe have to come back to something else. So it is not core research. It sits between research and development. And if people are familiar with technology readiness levels, it isn't 0 to 1, 2, or 3. It really is probably, it starts at technology readiness level 4, potentially most of it, and it goes to commercialization. So it's a very different flavor, but it's a gap that doesn't get done by the universities at the moment, and we're filling that gap. Yeah, hopefully that's clear. There's been a very quiet side here. You're very shy people on this side. Can I? Have you got enough? A couple more? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prof, for this conference. I'm sure we will adopt many of these practices in Mexico. And my question is about the timing to be mature in this scheme. I saw in one of the slides that in the UK it took about 20 years from the beginning to this point of maturity. So what could be your vision about Mexico? How long will could take this process?
So I think these processes will take time, inevitable, because it's a cultural shift from one thing to the other. What I've seen in the UK, and see the same thing in Norway, same thing in the Netherlands and other parts of Western Europe as well. These things don't happen in a year or 2 years. It's about a cultural shift, people making a change, and it takes a while for these things to get better down. So I think that is the big learning we have, is be really clear in your vision, what you want to do, and it then takes time. What I've seen here in Mexico on the back of the reforms is an incredibly ambitious program, which I think is a hugely important program that needs to be supported accordingly. And I think it probably breaks down into smaller steps as you go through it. But actually I think it's a very exciting program. From the experience we have, it does take a while. You have hundreds of thousands of people working in the industry. To take people along over that process, it's going to take quite a bit of time to make that work. But I think what I certainly have seen before I came here, what I saw when a delegation from Mexico was over in Aberdeen, a massive willingness to kind of kind of transform the industry to and take it even to the next level. It's been very successful already, but actually kind of taking it to the next level. It will take time from the experience, and it will take incredibly strong leadership and determination to make it happen. Now, I think all the ingredients are in place. It's just about making it happen. Can I go to this side first? Sorry, not because I don't want to speak to you, but I just want to get somebody from this side. So I do one or two more. So this gentleman here, and then one there, and then we'll stop.
Thank you for your presentation. I want to know what is the lines of research in EOR at the university?
So the main focus of our research is probably in 3 or 4 areas. The main thing is around drilling and wells. So we as a university have been very deliberate to saying is we want to carve out a niche and do drilling and wells. The reason we got an absolutely state-of-the-art drilling simulator is because it is part of our project to do so. We work with a big drilling contractor to do that happen. So drilling and wells is absolutely key one. The second one is around subsea. So subsea is a massive market for the UK, massive market internationally, and we absolutely think that is one of the areas where we think we are really quite good and want to be absolute world leaders on. The third area is going to be is asset management, asset integrity. Particularly, there's a lot of maturing assets out there. How do we deal with this aging process around how we make that happen in the future? Fourth area is around the whole area around smart data and big data. Is how do we connect the latest information technology to what's happening in the oil and gas industry? So basically, how do we predict predictive algorithms? How do we predict what's happening on maintenance before we actually have to maintain a platform? How do we have onshore control centers demanning things offshore? How do we have a complete different way of visualization, doing shutdowns onshore before we have to do them offshore? So that's the other area around asset management. And the last one, which is quite bespoke to us, is around decommissioning. We are in a phase of the North Sea where we're going to have to take quite a few installations away, which is the other side of what you're facing to some extent as you're building quite a new industry in some areas. We have to start taking things away. And how do you do that in a safe and environmental way? Again, so they're quite bespoke, but I think highly relevant for other areas as well.
Okay. Particularly in the area of NICL recovery, what is the lines that you have in the university?
So on the enhanced recovery, that's for us, it's really around in our production and production efficiency. So we are not the biggest university when it comes to geoscience, but we are very good at production and production efficiency and uptime of the platforms and optimization of that. That's where we would specialize at the moment. And again, from a UK perspective, you can understand why we're saying it, because we don't do a lot of exploration well. It's all about production and production optimization. Yeah, I'll take one more, and there was a person here on this side, if that's all right. Because I'm conscious you need to travel back to very busy traffic. So.
Hello. Good to have you here. And my question is about natural gas. So, as you know, while the demand of natural gas has been rising in Mexico, the production has been decreasing. And what seems to be the government's strategy is to rather import more gas from Texas, mainly from the United States, and not to invest or not to focus all the investments and funds on domestic production. So this has carried a bunch of critics from one side to another one. So there are ones that say we should invest or we should focus in the domestic production, and there are others that said, no, let's take advantage of the cheap prices from the Texas basin and all these shale revolution prices that are still very low, and let's keep importing. So my question would be, what's your take in this? Should Mexico divert its funds from domestic production to more imports, or should it keep more, I don't know, producing or pay their attention in domestic production and extraction?
So, what a great question. Probably not for me to comment on the politics, what should be developed or not, but maybe what I want to talk about mainly is around this, you know, there's a huge resource base in gas, and how do you make sure that resource base gets extracted in the right way? So I can see Many other countries have gone different routes. So some countries have chosen a route of using that for a major increase in power generation and use gas-fired power generation. I've seen many other countries looking at using the gas as an export product, be it either liquefied natural gas or be it compressed natural gas. Now, the one thing I am really struck about, having spent on my previous life looking quite a lot at the gas market, is the question is, why is the gas price low in North America? Yeah, and of course it affects what plays out in Mexico as well. And the reason, of course, is it's a huge market, but it's a closed market, it doesn't go anywhere. So the gas price in Europe is a lot higher, the gas price in Asia is even higher. Yeah, so actually it's quite interesting. The moment you start moving gas, you can actually access a different value chain. Over time, that market will change, because I know that the US is already looking at export facilities, and no doubt other places look at export facilities as well. So I can see there's a dynamic over time where global markets will start to converge on price. Yeah, and I can see that happening, particularly in the convergence that are going to happen to liquefied natural gas as being the kind of means. The increase in liquefied natural gas around the world has been incredible. I don't know if you followed it, but it's been absolutely incredible from the number of cargoes going around now, where they come from. So I think that will be the equalizer over time, and that will actually probably make the market very, very different. Now, how it plays out in the domestic Mexican element, I'm really sorry. I don't think I'm qualified to comment on it. But I do think the opportunity exists for a massive reserves base. There's a huge amount of gas here. There must be a market in some shape or form. And if I look at the talent in the room and the different skills I have, I'm sure you will fix this and sort this in no time. So thank you. Right, I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your time.
Bien, vamos a ceder ahora, a continuación, la palabra al doctor Nelson Mojarro González, representante para Europa del Fondo de Sustentabilidad Energética.
I just want to say thank you for all of you coming to the conference. I hope you enjoyed it. I did myself. And I would especially want to thank the direction of IMP and especially the Human Development area of IMP for hosting us, for hosting this conference here. We appreciate it very much. All the effort you put into the conference, Georgina, thank you very much. And also Professor Leeuw for an excellent conference. Thank you all.
Oh, back.
We all are thankful for your conference, your concepts, and your ideas. And as a sample of it, we want to recognize you with this present. This coffee pot has a painting. It's a reproduction of the painting that is in the front of this auditorium, and is painted by one of the greatest painters in Mexico. So I hope you enjoy your next coffee.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ahora sí ya te. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.